This week is just getting started, and already one of NASCAR's manufacturers is throwing some of its drivers under the bus. Let's talk about it. How's it going, everybody? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. Hope your guys' weeks are off to a good start. I have a couple different things I want to talk about today. One really big thing I want to focus on, but to start, I want to go over a couple smaller things, maybe some more positive news in the NASCAR world. This tweet was posted yesterday by good old Adam Stern. The first of the two tweets says, NASCAR will allow teams to have sports gambling sponsors at all races in 2019 after originally considering whether to restrict the category to the 3 current tracks where it's legal per new league regulations. His follow-up tweet goes in a little bit more detail. NASCAR is working on striking a league-wide data licensing deal with a sports betting company, and the plan is to have some of the revenue from that deal flow to teams. NASCAR is also looking for a straight sports betting sponsorship that will include a cross-industry spend. Now, both these are still fairly vague. It doesn't sound like any deal has been completely put into place yet, but we've heard, over the last several months, we've talked about on this show, the idea of NASCAR, trying to involve itself in the new sports betting, sports gambling, market. In case you haven't heard, sports betting is now becoming legal in many states across the United States, and that the number of states legalizing it is likely to go up as time goes on. No, I'm not here to judge the morality of, gambling or any of that type of stuff, but there is one very interesting takeaway I have from these two tweets, and it comes from that second part, that one little sentence towards the end of that paragraph. I'm interested in the bit of this report that says that some portion of the sports betting revenue will go straight to the race teams. With several high-profile race teams, across the different series in NASCAR closing down in recent months, a lot of the conversation has been shifted towards how do we bring the costs of racing down or help teams, continue to stay afloat in this tough racing economy, if you will. The fact that NASCAR is actively looking at new ways to bring in revenue for the sport and is willing to share some of that with the race teams themselves, that's nothing but good news for the sport. Especially for the race teams themselves, the ones who've been hit the hardest by NASCAR's recent struggles. Denny Hamlin last year spoke very critically of NASCAR's current business model, saying then that more of the big TV deal, more of NASCAR's revenue needs to be funneled to the race teams. I remember last year he criticized the fact that teams are forced to rely on sponsorship money entirely to fund their program as opposed to the purse money that they're supposed to get from NASCAR for competing in and succeeding in different racing events. One big criticism I've heard a lot since then is that, a lot of the TV money, because NASCAR has a multi-billion-dollar TV deal with Fox and NBC right now, a lot of that money goes to the racetracks and goes to other avenues in the sport. A small percentage of it, and maybe not a big enough percentage, goes to the race teams for winning races and competing and all that type of stuff. So the idea that NASCAR is looking to open up a new revenue stream, and the fact that some of this revenue could go to the race teams, and they're giving the race teams a lot of those opportunities, is a good thing for the sport, so I thought I'd bring that up because you know me, I like to be positive. I like to mention when the good things happen because nobody else will. The other reason this is great is it shows that NASCAR is actively trying to make changes to their business model. There's been a lot of talk in recent months and, some action. This is another form of that action that I think we're going to likely see a lot more of over the next couple of years. NASCAR is completely overhauling the way they used to do things. Now, the big thing I want to talk about in this episode has to do with an article I read from Autosport.com yesterday. I saw a few people sharing it around. I read it myself, and it was interesting. It raised some interesting points I want to talk about, and I want to discuss it because it raises some interesting questions. The main focus of this article is an interview with a Chevrolet VP of Performance Vehicles and Motorsports, Jim Campbell. And in this interview, Jim Campbell is asked about how Chevrolet struggled out of the gates in 2018 with the new Camaro, and Jim Campbell says that 2018 was a transition year of sorts. But then he also made some kind of veiled statements that I kind of want to just read for you guys. I'm just going to read you guys some of the quotes from this article. One thing he says when asked about the problems that Chevrolet ran into last year was this. He said, many veteran drivers have started to retire, and we're bringing in a young crew of drivers. He goes on to say, you see, Chase Elliott really accelerated his season for the back half with 3 wins in the last 14 races, and then Larson was very consistent all year long. Didn't make the Final Four, but proud of those guys. Interesting that he seems to be calling out the drivers as the biggest problem. He does give a compliment to Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson right there for basically leading the team last year. 3 wins for Elliott and, a lot of laps led for Larson. They led the team, I guess, last year. He makes, he compliments them, but he is kind of going after the drivers here. I'll read you guys a little bit more of what he said. He said, overall, the trajectory of the season was not exactly what we wanted. When you bring a new car in and you have changeover in drivers, those are big moments for manufacturers. So obviously here, this guy from Chevy, high up at Chevy, is kind of trying to deflect some of the blame for last year's struggles away from the manufacturer, and he's putting some of it on the drivers, which isn't entirely unfair. He's trying to, disassociate the brand with some of their struggles, which, I totally get, but his argument isn't without its flaws. He claims that new young drivers joining Chevy was one of the biggest reasons for their struggles, and he's not entirely wrong. I mean, you look at William Byron. He replaced Casey Kane after 2017. William Byron came into the Cup Series last year and had no wins, no top fives, finished 23rd in points. He had 9 DNFs? Not a great year. You know, we've seen historically in recent years how when you replace veteran drivers on a race team, you know, with young drivers, typically the performance dips. Remember 2015 and 2016, Joe Gibbs Racing had Kyle Busch, Matt Kenseth, Carl Edwards, and Denny Hamlin on their team, and they dominated those 2 years. Then you fast forward to 2018, they get rid of Matt Kenseth, Carl Edwards is gone, you got Eric Jones and Daniel Suarez, a couple of young drivers fill those spots. And what happened? Joe Gibbs Racing this year had their worst year in the Gen 6 era. Meanwhile, Stewart-Haas Racing added a veteran driver to their team, and they dominated this year. Historically, when veteran drivers are replaced by younger, inexperienced drivers, it takes a little while for the performance to pick back up. I mean, remember, Roush fell off a cliff when Kenseth and Edwards left within a 2-year span. So Jim Campbell here makes a good point. Chevy did have a lot of young drivers driving their race cars last year, so that definitely could have played a part in why they had a struggling year. Here's where his argument is flawed. If driver turnover was really the problem, then why did Jimmy Johnson have his worst year in the Cup Series ever? Like, I get it, you bring in young drivers, they maybe don't run so well, but Jimmy Johnson's a 7-time champion. He's been racing for, 16 years in the Cup Series? Why was he the 3rd best driver at Hendrick Motorsports? Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman have only been in the Cup Series a couple of years, and they both outran Jimmy Johnson last year in the same equipment. And Alex Bowman actually performed better in 2018 in that 88 car than Dale Jr. did the year before. Not even comparable, so I don't really see how he can blame the drivers so much for their struggles last year when, your biggest and baddest vet driver, the guy who's supposed to be your champion, wasn't even the best guy on his team last year. Now here's my point. 2019 is going to be a better year for Chevrolet. They're going to bounce back a little bit from 2018. They only won 4 races all of last year as an entire manufacturer. That's not acceptable. We haven't seen that from Chevy. It's going to get better for them in 2019. I guarantee that. But the thing I want to say to people who are reading this article or who are fans of Chevrolet as a manufacturer, the improvement in 2019 is not going to come from the drivers. It's going to come from the manufacturer itself. It's going to come from them building better race cars. It's going to come from the research side, the prep side, the crew chief side. That's where the improvement for Chevy is going to come from, not so much from the drivers. Yeah, sure, okay, Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, they all gained 1 more year of experience, but so did the rest of the field. All their competition got another year of experience too. But now I do want to pump the brakes. I don't want to get too excited for Chevy. I'm not saying they're going to run away and win the championship this next year because, 2018 was pretty concerning. Let's make some comparisons here. Think about in 2015 when Toyota changed their Camry. They upgraded their Camry that year. They went out and won the championship with Kyle Busch. First year in that new Camry, they won the championship. Fast forward again to 2017, Toyota again changed the Camry, and Truex went out and won the championship. Versus Chevrolet, which switched to the Camaro last year in 2018, and didn't have any cars go to the Final Four, only won 4 races. It was a struggle. They have quite the hill to climb. You see how quickly Toyota has been able to find success with their new cars versus how hard it was for Chevy to kind of scrap through last season. That's where I would still be a little bit concerned. I don't think 2019 is going to be a huge year for Chevy or anything, but I think it'll be better than 2018. I'm really curious to see what Ford does switching to the Mustang next year. But we'll save that for later. This episode's mostly talking about Chevy because I don't think it's fair to put the blame on the drivers. I don't think that argument really works. I think the problem with Chevy last year was more than anything at the race shop, at the manufacturers, building the engines, all that type of stuff. That's where the problem really started. I don't think the drivers really hurt their performance. But I understand where this guy's coming from. He's got to protect the brand. Can't sit there and let people talk bad about Chevy. Oh, it's the drivers. We had a lot of driver turnover. That's our excuse. I understand him trying to say that. But at the end of the day, it's going to fall on Chevrolet, the manufacturer's shoulders, to build them better race cars. Toyota is spending a lot of money in NASCAR. They are putting a lot of work into R&D. They're spending a lot of ad dollars in NASCAR. They are really investing heavily into the sport right now. That might play into why they've been so competitive the last few years. You put a lot of time and money into something, you're typically going to be a little better at it than someone who doesn't. And right now Toyota is giving NASCAR its full attention. Chevy and Ford are not putting as much into it as they used to. I think that's been the difference the last few years. Simple dollars and cents, but nobody likes to talk about money in NASCAR. It usually just makes people sad, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you guys for watching. That's all I have for today's episode. I've seen some weird driver rumors the last couple days. Somebody sent me something yesterday. I think it was Kamikaze Games on Twitter posted this. He'd heard from somebody who works apparently in advertising over there at one of those sponsors. That Christopher Bell and Brandon Jones might split time in a new car for Levine Family Racing this year. Have no idea if that's true. It could happen. I could believe it if it happened, but no reason to take that too seriously. Daytona 500 is only a few weeks away. It's only, less than 3 weeks until the Clash, so we're going to see cars on the racetrack very, very shortly. But thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram. Those are down below. T-shirts, you can get your own Out of the Groove t-shirt. You can check down by the description as well. P.O. Box, if you want to send me some cool NASCAR stuff, I will show it off off and shout you out in a future NASCAR video. So thanks everyone for checking all that out. And then of course a big thank you to our Patreon supporters: Michael Harrison at GWiz of the Stars, SelfishGifts.com, Mentally Defective, Cameron James Ticemore, John Koblenz, and Tim Shingen. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Let me know if I didn't. But thank you guys so much. We've added some new Patreon supporters recently. As you can see, I really appreciate that so many of you guys are taking the time to check that out. I really appreciate the support. I love that so many of you guys are, enjoying what I do over here. I'm trying to be a fun part of the NASCAR experience in a way, if you know what I'm saying. Like NASCAR, yeah, it's entertainment, it's a business, but at the end of the day, it's a sport. It's supposed to be entertainment. I'm trying to do my best to be a part of that entertainment and add to the experience. So I really appreciate that a lot of you guys are enjoying what we're doing over here. Really, thank you so much for checking that out. School has officially started back up for me, so I'll try to keep uploading a couple episodes a week. That's typically what I've been able to do throughout the off season so far, and I'm going to try to continue doing that into the regular season. But yeah, just want to let you guys know in case I miss a few days here and there, you guys don't get too worried. Just school is what it is. But thanks everyone for your support. I really appreciate it. I'll be back at it probably sooner rather than later with another episode. See you guys then. Thanks for watching.